So to get started with the exploration of defensive structures and characterological styles, I'd like to start with one of the more common presentations in psychotherapy. And I'll be using some diagnostic language that you might recognize from the DSM-5, but really this is intended to relay an overall strategy to confront certain very deep psychological conflicts, needs, um, fears, perspectives that are associated with all of these patterns of early conditioning. And so this doesn't necessarily only relate to someone that might qualify for a diagnosis. Rather, what I'm trying to do is say this might be familiar to you, in yourself, or some people that you know, perhaps a partner, a loved one, or a parent. And this first one is actually there's a fair amount of diversity here, because some individuals may have this structure, but they've found a way of overcompensating in certain ways. So we talk about counterphobic avoidance and various styles of that. And sadly, there's not much decent popular literature that I found. And it could just be I haven't looked hard enough. But I hope to at least convey one perspective on this here. And you might also hear me use the word oral, or borrowing from Stephen Johnson, symbiotic withdrawal. They all relate in different ways to this characterological style. And so I'll probably use them interchangeably, but hopefully with some explanation as to why each one of these terms bears significance. So for individuals that are, I guess you could say, characterologically avoidant, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person avoids other people or things, although many times these individuals do. It just depends on the subtype or the life circumstances, and also how far they've come, and maturing in spite of certain very real struggles with with their own needs on an interpersonal level, and with rejection, the fear of rejection. So in the last segment, I discussed the polyvagal theory and how there can be a failure to meet needs for empathic attunement, which includes mirroring. I see you, I see what you're going through. Idealization, and you're special, and just who you are really has value, and I care about it. And then mirroring, the capacity to see something similar in the other and in the self. And we all have something very fundamental in common. Something that goes beyond words. And then also certain characteristics that are very much specific to families, social groups, even personality styles. So these are all three very important aspects of the attachment process. And they're human needs. Perhaps some individuals are a little bit more okay without getting them than others. But if we're talking about individuals with an avoidant style, what's more important here is the notion that they may never have really been enjoyed enough to develop enough confidence that this big, scary world is something that one can then go claim. As one's waster. When there's a disruption at the oral level, it indicates that instead there's been a tremendous amount of stress where a certain level of connection and these attachment needs, it's been achieved, it's been noticed, but it's not reliably available. And when something like of this importance is available but not reliably available, it understandably generates some anxiety. And there's the possibility of really fluctuating between having and not having confidence that one will be mirrored, that one will be seen, that what's special in us will be noticed by others. And there's a lot of sentiment out there in the world today about belittling the need for this, but it is very true that especially a young child or an infant needs to be seen as special. And that is the position I'll take on that, whether or not others agree with me. So, typically in adulthood, working with individuals that struggle with this, like I say, the subtypes can vary widely, how it manifests. So it might be someone who's more argumentative, someone who's very, very timid and afraid. Generally, this level of distress is kept inward, though. And some of these individuals really live lives of great fear. Fear of what will happen if they get demonized or rejected. Excuse me. And that may translate into survival needs. What if I get fired? What if I get canceled for saying a little thing wrong? If if it's unwarranted, of course, but perhaps one's at the mercy of others. So individuals with the avoidance style really tend to fixate upon this to a level that may be taking up way too much real estate in their heads. And it leads to a very anxious life. So, let's see. I think one could say individuals that are struggling with oral anxieties may tend to make a bigger deal of these failures, these disruptions of acceptance, of attunement, than some other individuals would really relate to or understand. And this leads to the very likely possibility of what I will get to in another section on this, where there are mutual enactments, where one person's perception of what's there, what's lacking, what's a risk, what's offensive or hostile, really might not match what someone else thinks. But what's important to remember is for the avoidant, this sort of cradle of attachment is not really ever reliably arrived at. And so the stages that come after, they haven't made it to those. And so typically you'll see a bit of an impoverishment on a very deep level. Anhedonia, detachment, lack of enjoyment from, engagement in the energy for life's experiences, deficits in the capacity to feel pleasure or take interest in things. This isn't true for everyone that struggles with this, but there can also be a bit of a fluctuation, sort of a manic to depressive fluctuation, where when one finally believes that one can succeed and do something great, which is the desire for life's expression, when it comes up, it's often short-lived because there are these booby traps. And this isn't to say that bipolar disorder necessarily originates from the disruption at the oral level, even though there's a historical correlation drawn there in certain psychoanalytic circles. You do see these periods of dark times, of closing down, and also of, and this is where it starts to blend into what I'd like to treat as a separate characterological style, but there's quite a lot of bleed over, of what might be experienced as passive aggression or even masochism. But we'll come to that in another talk.